class left Bella, she fainted and was being weird about it and was trying not to puke. I believe the last sentence was, she fainted, Edward explained.
No, she didn't faint. She just laid down on the ground and felt really sick.
Yeah. So this is part 2 of Chapter 5. I opened my eyes. She fainted. I was in the office, and Edward was striding past the front counter towards the nurse's door. Mrs. Cope, the red-headed front office receptionist, ran ahead of him to open it and hold it open. The grandmotherly nurse looked up from her novel, astonished, as Edward swung me into the room and placed me gently on the crackly paper that covered the brown vital mattress on one cot. Then he moved to stand against the wall as far across the narrow room as possible. His eyes were bright and excited. She's just a little faint, he reassured the startled nurse. They're blood typing in biology. The nurse nodded sagely. There's always one. He muffled a snicker. Just lie down a minute, honey, it'll pass. I know, I sighed. The nausea was already fading. Does this happen a lot? She asked. Sometimes, I admitted. Edward coughed to hide another laugh. You can go back to class now, she told him. I'm supposed to stay with her. He said this with such assured authority that, even though she pursed her lips, the nurse didn't argue it further. I'll go get you some ice for your forehead, dear, she said to me and then bustled out of the room. You were right, I moaned, letting my eyes close. I usually am, but what about in particular this time? Ditching class is healthy. I practiced breathing evenly. You scared me for a minute there, he admitted after a pause. His tone made it sound like he was confessing a humiliating weakness. I thought Newton was dragging your dead body off to bury it in the woods. Ha ha. I still had my eyes closed, but I was feeling more normal every minute. Honestly, I've seen corpses with better color. I was concerned that I might have to avenge your murder. Poor Mike. I bet he's mad. He absolutely loathes me, Edward said cheerfully. You can't know that, I argued. But then I wondered suddenly if he could. I saw his face. I could tell. How did you see me? I thought you were ditching class. I was almost fine now, though the queasiness would probably pass faster if I'd eaten some for lunch. On the other hand, maybe I was lucky my stomach was empty. I was in my car listening to a CD. Such a normal response. It surprised me. I heard the door open and opened my eyes to see the nurse with a cold compress in her hand. Here you go, dear, she laid it across my forehead. You're looking much better, she added. I think I'm fine, I said, sitting up, just a little ringing in my ears, no spinning. The mint green walls stayed where they should. I could see she was about to make me lie back down, but the door opened just then, and Miss Cope stuck her head in. We got another one, she warned. I hopped down to free up the cot to the next invalid. I handed the compress back to the nurse. Here, I don't need this. And then Mike staggered through the door, now supporting a sallow-looking Lee Stevens, another boy in our biology class. Edward and I drew back against the wall to give them room. Oh no, Edward muttered. Go out of the office, Bella. I looked up at him, bewildered. Just trust me, go. I spun and caught the door before it closed, darting out of the infirmary. I could feel Edward right behind me. You actually listened to me. He was stunned. I smelled the blood, I said, wrinkling my nose. Lee wasn't sick from watching other people like me. People can't smell blood, Edward contracted. Well, I can. That's what makes me sick. It smells like rust. And salt. He was staring at me with unfathomable expression. What? I asked. It's nothing. Mike came through the door then, glancing from me to Edward. The look he gave Edward confirmed what Edward had said about loathing. He looked back at me, his eyes glum. Well, you look better, he accused. Just keep your hand in your pocket, I warned him. It's not bleeding anymore, he muttered. Are you going back to class? Are you kidding? I'd love to just turn around and come back. Yeah, I guess so. So, are you going this weekend to the beach? While he spoke, he flashed another glare towards Edward, who was standing against the cluttered counter, motionless as a sculpture, staring off into space. I tried to sound as friendly as possible. Sure, I said I was in. We're meeting at my dad's store at 10. His eyes flickered to Edward again, wondering if he was giving out too much information. His body language made it clear that it was not an open invitation. "I'll be there," I promised. "I'll see you in gym then," he said, moving uncertainly towards the door. "See ya," I replied. I forgot this is chapter 5, so it's still very poorly written.
Yeah. What I'm stuck on is, like, she was like, what a normal response, listening to music in his car.
Yeah.
Even if she knew he's a vampire, what does she expect him to be doing?
I don't know. That caught me off guard, too. Like, oh, it's so normal. He's just sitting. But also, like, is he ditching class, just sitting in the car, just spacing out, looking at the sky?
He's disassociated.
Just trying to come to terms. What CD would Edward be listening? It'd probably be something pretentious, like some sort of class. I think
Maybe
all
like,
he owns is classical music. So.
Or maybe like OTEP.
Yes. Jim, I groaned. "I can take care of that." I hadn't noticed Edward moving to my side, but he spoke in my ear. "Go sit down and look pale." That wasn't a challenge. I always look pale. My recent swoon had left a light sheen of sweat on my face. I sat in one of the creaky folding chairs and rested my head against the wall with my eyes closed. Fainting spells always exhausted me. I heard Edward speaking softly in the corner. "Mrs. Cope?" "Yes." I hadn't heard her return to her desk. "Bella has gym next hour. I don't think she feels well enough. Actually, I was thinking I should take her home now. Do you think you could excuse her from class?" His voice was like melting honey. I could imagine how much more overwhelming his eyes must be.
Melting honey would just be burning.
"Do you need to be excused too, Edward?" Miss Cope fluttered. Why couldn't I do that? Why couldn't I do that? "No, I have Miss Goff. She won't mind." "Okay, it's all taken care of." "You feel better, Bella?" she called to me. I nodded weakly, hamming it up just a bit. "Can you walk, or do you want me to carry you again?" With his back to the receptionist, his expression became sarcastic. "I'll walk." I stood carefully, and I was still fine. He held the door for me, his smile polite, but his eyes mocking. I walked out into the cold, fine mist that had just begun to fall. It felt nice, the first time I'd actually enjoyed the constant moisture falling out of the sky as it washed my face clean of my sticky perspiration. I clearly need a drink. "Thanks," I said as he followed me out. "It's almost worth getting sick to miss Jim." "Anytime." He was staring straight forward, squinting into the rain. "So are you going this Saturday? This weekend, I mean." I was hoping he would, though it seemed unlikely. I couldn't picture him loading up to a carpool with the rest of the kids from school. He didn't belong in the same world.
He wasn't invited.
Yeah, she even made a point to be like, "Oh yeah, he's not invited." So are you like an asshole that's just gonna crash the party, or...
Crash the party, Edward.
Crash it, Edward. But just hoping that he might give me the first twinge of enthusiasm I'd felt for the outing. "Where are you guys going?" he said, still looking ahead, expressionless. "Down to La Push, to First Beach." I studied his face, trying to read it. His eyes seemed to narrow infinitesimally. Damn. He glanced down at me from the corner of his eye, smiling wearily. "I really don't think I was invited, Bella." I sighed. Okay. Weird. It paused and then reconnected. Okay. Hopefully that's fun. "Let's you and I not push poor Mike any further this week. We don't want him to snap." His eyes danced. He was enjoying the idea more than he should. "Mike, schmike," I muttered, preoccupied by the way he said "you and I." I liked it more than I should. We were nearing the parking lot, and I veered left towards my truck. Something caught my jacket, yanking me back. "Where do you think you're going?" he asked, outraged. Outraged. He was gripping a fistful of my jacket in his hand. I was confused. "I'm going home." "Didn't you hear me? I promised to take you home safely. Do you think I'm going to let you drive in your condition?" His voice was fierce and indignant.
What about her truck? Are you going to make her walk tomorrow?
"What condition? What about my truck?" I complained. "I'll have Alice drop it off after school." He was towing me towards his car, pulling me by my jacket.
I would not want Alice driving my vehicle.
Yeah. It was all I could do to keep from falling over. He'd probably just drag me along if I did fall. That's a red flag. "Let go," I insisted. He ignored me. I staggered along sideways across the wet sidewalk until we reached the Volvo. Then he finally freed me. I stumbled against the passenger door. "Oh, you're so pushy," I grumbled. "It's open," was all he responded, and he got into his driver's side. I am perfectly capable of driving myself home. I stood by the car, fuming. It was raining harder now, and I'd never put my hood up, so my hair was dripping down my back. He lowered the automatic window and leaned towards me across the seat. Get in, Bella. I didn't answer. I was mentally calculating my chances of reaching my truck before he could catch me. I had to admit, they weren't good. I'll just drag you back, he threatened, guessing my plans. I'm very happy they took all this out for the movie. Like, this is all just goddamn.
I'm gonna hunt you like a wild animal, Bella.
Like, he drugged me across the parking lot no matter how many times I protested. And then when I threatened to leave... Yeah. And then when I threatened to leave, he told me he'd catch me and drag me back. This is completely unnecessary, I said stiffly. He didn't answer. He fiddled with the controls, turning the heater up and the music down. As he pulled out of the parking lot, I was preparing to give him the silent treatment, my face in full pouting mode. But then I recognized the music playing, and my curiosity got the better.
Is it Butcher?
It's Claire de Lune.
Oh my god.
Claire de Lune, I asked, surprised. Yeah, you know, Debussy. He sounded surprised too. Not well, I admitted. My mother plays a lot of classical music around the house. I only know my favorites. It's one of my favorites, too. He stared out through the rain, lost in thought. Yeah, so you're just listening to, like, the classical version of a ringtone.
Classical music, like, God, I wish I could go to school without having to worry about blood.
It's not even, like, a fun classical. It's like, this is literally what you can get for free as stock music on ringtones. Which is probably where Stephanie Meyer got the idea. I listened to the relaxing music against the light gray leather seat. It was impossible not to respond to the familiar soothing melody. The rain blurred everything outside the window into gray and green smudges. I began to realize we were driving very fast. The car moved so steadily, so evenly, though I didn't feel the speed. Only the town flashing by gave it away.
It's built like a chicken.
Hey, what is your mother like? He asked me suddenly. I glanced over to see him studying me with curious eyes. She's like me, but prettier, I said. He raised his eyebrows.
She's not like you, she's fun.
I have too much Charlie in me. She's more outgoing than I am, and braver. She's irresponsible and slightly eccentric, and she's a very unpredictable cook. She's my best friend.
Like you.
She's my best friend. I stopped. Talking about her was making me depressed. How old are you, Bella? His voice... Just how old are you?
Like, wow, that's so sad and pathetic.
His voice sounded frustrated, but I couldn't imagine. He stopped the car and I realized we're at Charlie's house already. The rain was so heavy that I could barely see the house at all. It was like the car was submerged under a river. 17? I responded a little confused. You don't seem 17. His tone was reproachful. It made me laugh. What? He asked curious again. My mom always says I was born 35 years old, and that I get more middle-aged every year. I laughed and then sighed. Well, someone has to be the adult. I paused for a second. You don't seem much like a junior in high school yourself. He made a face and changed the subject. So, why did your mother marry Phil? I was surprised he remembered the name. I'd mentioned it only once before, and that was nearly 2 months ago. It took me a moment to answer. My mother, she's very young for her age. I think Phil makes her feel younger. At any rate, she's crazy about him. I shook my head. The attraction was a mystery to me. And do you approve? He asked. Does it matter? I countered. I want her to be happy, and he is who she wants. That's very generous. I wonder, he mused. What? Would she extend the same courtesy to you, do you think? No matter who your choice was. He was suddenly intent, his eyes searching mine.
Why are you trying to make Bella pick up on your mom?
How do you know your mom's not a piece of shit? I think so, I stuttered. But she's the parent, after all, so it's a little bit different. No one too scary, then, he teased. I grinned in response. What do you mean by scary? Multiple facial piercings and extensive tattoos? Well, that's one definition, I suppose. Well, what's your definition, Edward? But he ignored my question and asked me another. Do you think that I could be scary? He raised one eyebrow, and the faint trace of a smile lightened his face. I thought for a moment and wondered whether the truth or a lie would go over better. I decided to go with the truth. I think... You could be, if you wanted to. Are you frightened of me now?
No.
The smile vanished, and his heavenly face became suddenly serious. No, but I answered too quickly. His smile returned. So now you're going to tell me about your family? I asked to distract him. It's got to be much more interesting than mine. He was instantly cautious. What do you want to know? The Collins adopted you? I verified. Yes. I hesitated for a moment. What happened to your parents? They died. Many years ago. His tone was a matter of fact. I'm sorry. What did you expect, Bella?
Yeah, like, clearly they're dead or they didn't want him. Either way, it's, like, bad.
And I don't really remember them that clearly. Carlisle and Esme have been my parents for a long time. And you love them? It wasn't a question. It was obvious in the way he spoke of them. Yes? He smiled. I couldn't imagine two better people. Well, you're very lucky. I know I am. And your brother and sister? He glanced at the clock on the dashboard. Same, Edward. My brother and sister, and Jasper and Rosalie for that matter, are going to be quite upset if they have to stand in the rain waiting for me. Oh, sorry, I guess you have to go. I didn't want to get out of the car. And you probably want your truck back before Chief Swan gets home, so you don't have to tell him about the biology incident. He grinned at me. I'm sure he's already heard. There's no secrets in Forks, I sighed. He laughed, and there was an edge to his laughter. Have fun at the beach. Good weather for sunbathing. He glanced out at the sheeting rain. Won't I see you tomorrow? No. Emmett and I are starting the weekend early. What are you going to do? A friend could ask that, right? I hope the disappointment wasn't too apparent in my voice. We're going to be hiking in Goat Rocks Wilderness, just south of Rainier. I remember Charlie had said that Collins went camping frequently. Oh, well, have fun. I tried to sound enthusiastic, but I don't think I fooled him, though a smile was playing around the edges of his lips. Will you do something for me this weekend? He turned to look me straight in the face, utilizing the full power of his burning gold eyes. I nodded helplessly. Don't be offended, but you seem to be one of those people who are just attracted to accidents, like a magnet. So, try not to fall into the ocean or get run over or anything, all right? He smiled crookedly. The helplessness had faded as he spoke. I glared at him. I'll see what I can do. I snapped as I jumped out into the rain. I slammed the door behind me with excessive force. He was still smiling as he drove away. That is actually the end of Chapter 5. Thank God, that chapter was rough. Just poorly written all around. What is that? That looks cute.
That's a